welcome to today's Play Attention webinar. We have a lot of people joining us, so I'm just going to go over a few things while I continue to let people join the room. So we are going to be talking about teens and motivation today. I know that's a topic that is an important topic anytime, but especially since we are experiencing a lot of shelter in place and a lot of social distancing. And so, I think it's a really great topic for us to touch on today. A few things before we get started. We are recording this webinar, so we will be sending out that replay link after the webinar is over, so you can share that with a partner, with your children, with any professionals. We're happy to let you share that. Also, you'll see down below that there is a chat box and a hand icon. The chat box is if you have any questions while we're going through today. I'm the only one that can see those, and so if we have time, I will address those as they come in, but I definitely will be touching on all of the questions when we get to the end today. Additionally, I may ask for if agreement or if you've had experiences like that. And since we are virtual and I can't see any of you, we're going to just use that hand icon. I might ask you to raise your hand if it's something that sounds familiar to you or that you've experienced in the past. If at any time you get kicked off of the webinar, you can just go ahead and click on that link that you used to connect, and that will get you right back on. My name is Amber, and I will be your host today. Again, we're going to be talking about motivating teens, and just a little background about myself. I've spent over 15 years in secondary and post-secondary education, so a lot of work with teens and adults, helping them with academic goals, helping them reach that potential that we know is there. Done a lot of work with nonprofits as well, working with low-income families and helping them achieve goals as well. Spent some time doing grant writing, and I am a mother of 2 teenagers. So I definitely am experiencing some of the things that you're all experiencing right now. I can't remember if we're going on week 8 or 9. It all kind of blends together right now, but I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old who will be 15 next week. So experiencing some of those same things. So I want to share some things with you today to really help them, motivate them, and really just make it a little bit more cohesive in your house. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today, and again, there's a lot of you joining us, so I'm going to try to get to some of those questions as they come across. But who here, this is a picture that I've seen, that I've heard of, where really struggling to not only stay engaged in every type of activity, but really staying engaged with the homework. If this is something that you can relate to, go ahead and raise your hand. Just right now is a really hard time. We're doing tons of technology right now, lots of virtual learning. I know we're getting close to the end of our school year, but I know some individuals are still going later into May and into June. So if this is something you're experiencing, go ahead and raise your hand where you're seeing your child really, really struggle academically and to stay engaged. And I am seeing, like I said, we have a huge group, and I'm seeing over half of you raise your hand right now. I'm experiencing that sometimes as well, making sure that they're staying engaged and staying motivated in what they need to do, because even though school is virtual, it still needs to be done, and it's still an important piece. So thank you all for participating in that by raising your hand. We're going to be covering a few things on our agenda today. Why is there a lack of motivation? I want to talk a little bit of background about that. I want to give you 10 ways to start helping motivate them today. And we're going to talk a little bit about play attention, because oftentimes with the lack of motivation, we can also experience executive function issues, and we can really help with those on the play attention side. So we're going to address some of that as we go through today. Why are they unmotivated? Okay, so you may think that it is defiance. A lot of times when they're unmotivated, we see defiance. So you may think it's just trying to be defiant, that they're lazy, that they don't care about what's happening and what's going on around them. Oftentimes we think that as parents. It can really be hard not to think that sometimes because we're under a lot of stress as well. You know, there are a lot of us between work, working virtually, or having a layoff at work, or different pieces. You know, we're looking at the whole big picture. And when we can't get our team to do something, sometimes these are the first things that we really, you know, relate to, and we try to connect them to. But oftentimes it actually can be fear. It can be a lack of routine, depression, unknown expectations, and weak executive function. So, you know, oftentimes those are the different things that people are experiencing, or that teens are experiencing during times of change and during times where we see them unmotivated. I'm getting a couple messages here that the video is not so great. If you're struggling with the video connection, if you disconnect and reconnect, that should help. Hopefully that will help you get reconnected. But again, we are recording all of this, and so we will be sending out that recording afterwards. So what do teens want? Okay, again, you know, I have teens at home. I've worked with teens a lot over the years, and there are certain things that they really want, that that help them, that help move them through their day-to-day, that help motivate them. Independence, their identity. A lot of teens, that is their sole being, is wrapped up in their identity. In you know, social connections. Who here has been told, I just want to see my friends. I just want to see them. Can I just see my friends? And you know, it's so hard for so often we thought, oh, you know, our teens have that connection, right? Virtually, they're able to connect with their friends all the time. And they can still do that, right? There's Zoom, there's FaceTime, there's text messaging. Some of them connect over video games. But that's still different than that social connection that they had every day. And I don't think that some of them realize that was such a big part of their day-to-day. So a lot of them are missing that, and they so desperately want it. Activities, routine, and consistency. So when you look at all of these pieces right now, many of them are missing, right? Independence, they don't have that right now. They are with us 24/7. You know, even though they are our teens and they're our responsibility, and we, you know, they live under our roof, they still had some independence in their day-to-day when they were going to school, when they were going to activities. They had the ability to make choices and really have that independence, and they're missing that now. They had an identity, and they still have that identity, but it's hard for them, again, because they're not having that interaction with individuals. And some of our, you know, our teens have their identity wrapped up in an activity. So, you know, they were in a certain club, they were in a certain sport, they played an instrument, they sang in the choir, right? So there were certain activities that was part of their identity, part of what is ingrained in them, and now they're missing that right now. Social connection. You know, I know from a lot of adults, we've had several webinars focused on adults as well, and we know this is a struggle even with adults, because we're used to seeing our parents, some of us, we're still used to seeing our friends, even our coworkers and our colleagues, and we're missing that right now. Almost all of us are virtual. Some individuals are still front lines and essential workers, so they're going in, but there's still that social distancing that we're doing, so missing that. Activities. So I related this back to identity. You know, who here has a teen that's missing out on an activity that was just so much of their identity and their life? They, you know, it was their passion. And that's so often, we think of it sometimes as an activity, but part of it is their passion. Routine. Even though we're trying to get them on a routine now, it's still a big struggle, because I don't know about you, but with me, with my children, they're both in high school. I have a freshman and a junior, and their school's doing a phenomenal job about really ensuring that connectivity of their education, but it's not like going to the classroom, right? On a traditional school day, school started at 8:30. They went to period 1. They're in block scheduling, so their classes are 90 minutes apiece. Then they go to period 2, and then they have lunch, and period 3 and before, and there is that set time that they're with that teacher and that they're with that group, that cohort of individuals. Now I have some of their classes, they're having set virtual meetings at a certain time. Other times, other classes, my freshman isn't having as many. So she has assignments that she needs to do, but not necessarily that routine of I'm going to the classroom or I'm logging in and I see my teacher, right? And so that routine is lacking. Plus, many of them had after school activities and they're missing that. So that routine that they're used to day in and day out has now changed. And there's not consistency. You know, things are changing in our society. Things are changing as coronavirus, as we learn more, as more things go on. And so even in our lives, there's not consistency. So you can imagine what they're experiencing day in and day out. We are their stability. And since we're experiencing that inconsistency, they're experiencing that as well. And those are all things that they really need to anchor to be able to move forward. And so what are they experiencing, right? So they're currently experiencing, and I hit on these, some of these in the last slide that I had, that lack of independence. They are, you know, it's a struggle sometimes to get them out of their room to engage with other people because they're so used to having their alone time and going off and doing their own thing. And now they only have alone time if they're in their room, and if the environment they're in is a little bit smaller, then they're really struggling to find that space. And when they're lacking these things, this is where you can see that lack of motivation. You can see that depression happen. You can see that inconsistency in their behavior. You can see that frustration. I'm sure many of you have experienced frustration with your family members because you're together so much. You know, we're so used to going off to work or going off and having lunch with our friends or going to book club or whatever the case may be. We have that time alone, and none of us are having that anymore. And so that independence and that socialism, that social connection is gone, right? So social isolation, a lot of them are experiencing, even though that they can talk to their friends virtually, they're still missing that connection. They're still missing that team connection that many of them really enjoy. Lack of activity. So again, I mentioned this before, the activity that they're really involved in, they are missing that and they're struggling to find something to fill that time. Lack of routine, again, we talked about that in the last slide. Lack of consistency. You know, with teens and with children in general, the more consistent we can be, the better off they are going forward, right? They know what to expect. They know what we expect of them, those expectations. In the classroom, they know what those expectations are at home and in their activities. But now all of a sudden things have shifted, and they shifted very quickly. I don't know about your situation, but I think the last day we went to school is ironically Friday the 13th in March, Friday the 13th. And since then, it has been a little bit change of consistency. The first couple weeks looked like one way, then the next couple weeks it looked a different way, right? And so really having that as we go forward. And then the lack of confidence. Oftentimes, teenagers will wrap their identity in what they're confident in, what they're strong in, their strengths. Virtual learning can be very difficult for many individuals, and not because they don't know the material, not because that they're not smart, but because they have that confidence. It's new to them. They don't know what it is. It's different than being in that classroom. Some individuals struggle a little bit with technology. And so when you have that lack of confidence, you can also have that lack of motivation. And so these are different things that our teens are experiencing. They may be experiencing one, they may be experiencing multiple. And that's why you're seeing that lack of motivation for them to follow through, because it's totally different and it's change. And change can be very difficult. So therefore, they may seem lazy and unmotivated, but they're not. They're struggling to find that anchor, to be connected to something, to find the new normal. I've said that a lot in my webinars if you've attended them. They're struggling to find that new normal. What does that look like? Where can they find consistency? Where can they find structure? Where can they find that social engagement that they need? What activities can they have? Because now we're hearing a lot of even summer activities being canceled. I know my 17-year-old got his lacrosse season ended early. They only got to get halfway through their season, and they've talked about having a summer league, but that does not look like it's going to happen now. And so that was really, really frustrating for him and really discouraging him, and caused some of that, what looked like lack of motivation. So how can we help? What are ways that we can start helping connecting with them today? So I'm going to talk 10 different ways. Actually, there's 11 because there's a bonus. I always like to throw in a bonus. We can make these slides available as well, and so we can share these with you at the end when we send that webinar recording over, and you can have these slides as well, because there is a lot of information to share, and some of them you can probably relate to and say, oh my gosh, this is something that would be very, very valuable for me, and some of them may not be applicable to you going forward. Number one, be understanding. Just like individuals are being understanding with us, employers, colleagues, right? Be understanding to them. They are frustrated, they are lonely, they're confused, and they're scared. So really think about that. Think about the feelings that you might have right now about everything going on. Your teens are having the exact same feelings, and teenagers have a harder time with their emotional regulation. And so it's harder for them to get those feelings out. So you often see them withdraw, which looks like laziness, but it's not. It's the fact that they're struggling with these different emotions and how to get them out. So be understanding. Give them the benefit of the doubt, okay? So number one, that's number one. Number two, support virtual school. Now, as I mentioned, we're getting very close to the end in our household. I think we have just 2 weeks left of school. Some individuals, you might be experiencing longer schooling, or if for whatever reason we continue down this path, supporting that virtual school and helping them with that structure is going to be imperative. So develop a routine. We did a webinar when this first started. I think we did it either late March or early April about online schooling, effective ways to do online schooling. If you didn't see that webinar, and that's a webinar that you're interested in viewing to get some additional tips to really help you with that routine, to help you with that schedule, type in virtual school webinar, and we will get you that recording when we do follow-ups at the end. Because there was a lot of great tools in there to help support you with online school. And right now, as some of us come to an end, it might not be as applicable, but for some of us, it may be very important. So if you're interested in learning more about that virtual school webinar, we will get you that, and so you can watch that as well. But develop a routine. That's so important. Just like thinking about you working from home. For many of us, we're working from home right now, and at first it was like, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. I'm trying to be mom, I'm trying to be employee, I'm trying to be wife, I'm trying to do all of those things, or dad, employee, across the board. And so developing a routine is imperative, right? So supporting them by developing that routine for them, because that's one thing that they're lacking. Create expectations. Teenagers need to know what you expect. That's going to be applicable across the board. So whether you're struggling with their motivation now in this environment of this new normal, or you were struggling with it for years or months before this ever started, give them expectations. They need to know what you expect from them. And those expectations need to be followed up with consequences. And so that gets into other areas, but we need to set their expectations. We expect that from 8 to 10 every single morning, they are online, finding out what their assignments are, meeting with their teams, doing whatever they need to do. Then maybe we have free time. Maybe we have a break where they can read, they can just do social media, whatever the case. And then we have lunch, and then 1 to 3 o'clock, we're back on, and this is the expectations. And I expect, you to complete your assignments just like you did in the classroom. I expect that you put your all in. I expect that you ask for help. So making those expectations very, very clear. And it's important in this process that you involve them in this. They, again, want that independence. So involving them in creating those expectations, then that routine is going to be very helpful for you. And then follow through, meaning stay on track. Whatever routine you set up, stick to that as close as possible. Now, life is life, right? And things happen. And occasionally we have to go outside of that routine, but as consistent as you can stay, you're going to be more effective. And that's how you can help them supporting their virtual school. Encourage healthy habits, nutrition, exercise, and sleep. So I don't know about you, but my 17-year-old is eating me out of house and home, right? So we had to say, okay, at school, you can't eat all day. At home, you don't need to eat all day. Part of it was boredom and really helping establish, again, a routine so that didn't happen. But making sure I could keep as many healthy snacks in the house as possible, healthy options for them. Both of my teens always took their lunch to school anyway, so that wasn't really much different, but just ensuring that we continue to provide the nutrition that's really helpful for them to be effective. We know nutrition is tied directly to how you feel. When you put good things in, you have more energy, you're able to think better, you have more, brain function. And so really continuing that nutrition. Exercise is also really important, and that's just kind of hard depending on where you're at, depending on what level you are in your shelter in place. Going for a walk. If you can go out in the yard and kick a soccer ball around. My son has been hitting the lacrosse ball against the wall at home, and my daughter has been playing golf into a net. So getting any kind of exercise possible, do family activities together, have a push-up contest, do sit-ups, do yoga, lots of different activities that you can do that don't take a lot of equipment or any equipment, and you can do in a small space. And then sleep. This is a really big one, especially when we're talking to teenagers, because they are connected in so many different ways. Cell phones, computer, video games. And if we don't, again, put a routine in and an expectation, you can wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and realize your teen is playing video games and they've been up all night, and now they're going, even though they have virtual school in the morning, it's going to be very, very hard for them to focus. And so trying to put limits on some of those things and using those things as rewards, right? So, okay, 30 minutes a day of, electronics, or all electronics are turned off at, 10:30 or earlier, depending on their age, and all the electronics go in the kitchen to charge. That's what we implemented even before this happened, because with our teenagers, oftentimes, once I'm asleep, I'm asleep. And so I was missing that they weren't getting the quality sleep that they needed because of the equipment that they had and that they were connected to. And so taking everything, computers and cell phones out of the bedroom for a charging station, in the kitchen, they're there, and that way they get much more quality sleep. It's helpful for adults as well. We know that when we take that technology out of our bedrooms, we're more effective and we have more sleep, so we are more effective long term. Validating their disappointment. So this was a big one at our house, and it was something that I really needed to wrap my mind around, because for me, I'm looking at the big picture, right? I'm a big picture person. I'm thinking about jobs, I'm thinking about economy, I'm thinking about loved ones that are maybe more susceptible. I'm thinking about, okay, how can we make a routine here? And the whole time, my 17-year-old was upset because he didn't get to go on his class trip to Cincinnati and Chicago, right? And to me, I was like, well, that's, a small thing. Cincinnati, Chicago, I mean, that's something that we can do, right, long term. But I needed to validate his disappointment, because to him and his world and what we talked about earlier, that was an important piece. They do it every single year in this class. It's a very important trip, and they were looking forward to it. So we need to validate their disappointment and understand that even though it does not seem like a big thing to us, okay, lacrosse season got canceled. Oh, maybe I don't have to run as many places. I don't have to split my time as much. But to them, that is their life. That's their passion. That's their independence. And to them, it was a very big deal. Prom. For some individuals, it was a huge deal to not have prom and graduation. And a lot of parents also struggled with the lack of graduation for their seniors this year. So we need to validate the fact that their sports got canceled. They can't be with their team. Proms got canceled, class trips got canceled, and graduations got canceled. And by validating their disappointment, we can start to see their big picture. Our big picture as adults and as the responsible party are going to look totally different, but that doesn't mean that their disappointment is not valid. So again, we need to be understanding, and we need to validate their disappointment. We need to practice mindfulness. So right now can be a scary time, right? We're unsure of what's happening. We don't know what the future looks like. things are almost in a day by day, week by week basis. So how do we help quiet that anxiety, quiet those racing thoughts, and really help us focus in on what we need to do right now? So not only does mindfulness help quiet everything down, it helps with our focus on the now. So being mindful in the time that I'm spending doing my virtual school, I'm focusing on the now. I'm putting my 100% into that. Again, it quiets anxiety and fear. So I'm being able to just kind of quiet the what if, or because last time, right? And I can really quiet that, and I can really bring myself to a point where, again, I can focus on the now, and I'm not having that constant dialogue in my head that is telling me, oh no, what if, or oh, this happened and it's terrible. And I can really focus on the now, and I can build on that, and I can be present in what I'm doing right now. Now, mindfulness can be very difficult for someone to learn, depending on if they're struggling with an attention difficulty, if they're struggling with executive function. And that's one area that play attention can really help with. So we'll address that when we get to that part of the agenda. But practicing mindfulness as a family is important as well, because as an adult, it's one practice that I've continued to use because it helps, again, with that unknown, not being sure, or any frustration or anxiety, because we're all together and we don't have that break. And really being able to quiet your mind, center yourself, and give yourself that mental break that you really need. Model the behavior you want them to do. So if we are anxious and frustrated and not eating well and not sleeping well and not getting physically active, that's the example that we're presenting for them. So we're the example. Whether you're a good example or not is up to you. So you can follow through with these things and show that even though we are in a time of uncertainty, we can still follow through, right? But there's also a way that if we're not doing that, that we're giving them that it is okay to be anxious. It is okay to not take care of ourselves. It is okay to not follow through. And so our actions speak so much louder than our words. So as parents, if the more calm that we can be, the more motivated that we can be, the more we can stick to our routine, the better off we are giving that example to our teens, okay? Effective communication. Right now, again, you've heard through this, there's been a little bit of a consistent message that we have to listen and we have to validate what they're doing. And that comes from effective communication. And I know sometimes right now it's so silly, some of the things, or in a parent's mind, right, that it may seem silly of what they're worried about, right? Oh, I'm not going to be able to play summer lacrosse. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I'm so angry. And to me, I'm like, well, we have a house, we have food, we have these things, and those are the priorities. But those are my priorities. Those are not his priorities. And so we need to listen and effectively communicate with them. We need to let them tell us what's wrong. What is the matter? What are you feeling? And we have to listen. Not listen to reply, but listen to hear what they have to say so we can help them move forward with what they're struggling with, right? So we need to have that effective communication. If that means, okay, we have an argument, everybody's going to go to their own corners, right, for an hour, and we're going to be quiet and we're not going to think about it, and we're going to write down some things that we want to share with the other person. Then we're going to come back an hour later when we've both calmed down, and we're going to have an effective communication where I'm going to share what I have to share, and then I'm going to let them take in that information. And then that was and then we're going to listen to what they have to say and what they have to share, and then move forward with that. And so really important for us to listen to them and effectively communicate. We talk a lot about when we're struggling with individuals that are struggling with attention and having that conversation. It's always important to have any conversations not in the heat of an argument, right? We need to, that's not an effective time. And actually the best time to have a conversation is when we've scheduled it ahead of time. So if you've really struggled with your teenagers, say, okay, Saturday at noon, I want to have a conversation with you about some expectations, and then I want to hear from you what you want to see moving forward, right? So you're going to give them time to think about it, to put their thoughts down on paper. You're going to put your thoughts down on paper. You've scheduled it, so you've allotted the right amount of time for it, and then you're going to come together, right? And then you're going to talk about it, and it's going to give the two of you, and maybe you don't come to solution then, and your solution is, okay, I'm going to take into what you say into consideration and under advisement, and then we're going to meet again in 24 hours. And so just having that communication pattern is really helpful. Give them space when they feel overwhelmed. I know as a parent, sometimes right now you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is a great time. All of our family is under the same roof. We're not rushing to 50 million activities. We're not, struggling to have dinner at the dinner table. I want to do all of these things. And that's good. And there needs to be time for family activities, but we also need to give them space. They are used to, again, spending time with their peers, doing the activities that they enjoy. And so, unfortunately, not all the time with our parents is fun time, right? Time that they want. And when they're overwhelmed, pushing everyone together is not always going to be effective either. And so I always like to say, okay, when I was that age, how did I feel, right? Can I put myself back in that situation and have that same experience that they had? And if would I have wanted my parents to give me space in this or not? And another thing is to ask them, do you need to give me space? Do I need to give you space? We've started to go to that when one of my go-tos was, oh, why are you upset? What's wrong? And I got, nothing was wrong. Well, they were feeling overwhelmed. And so now I say, do you need some space? Yes. Or do you need to talk about it? Yes. And so being able to give them the space when they need the space, again, think about yourself. Oftentimes when we're overwhelmed and frustrated, we don't want to go right into that conversation. We need some quiet time. So giving our team quiet time as well. Giving them praise. It's so important right now to reward them for the things that they're doing, no matter how small it is, because they are trying the best that they can do given the situation that they are having. And so often as parents, we see and want to correct the things that we maybe don't appreciate or that are frustrating, and we fail to give positive feedback for the positive things. Some things are like, well, I just expected them to do that, but we need to give them the praise. We need to give them that recognition, and that's going to help them as well, because they need to have that feeling that they are accomplishing something. And so if they help around the house, as silly as it may sound, if you see that they vacuum the floor, you tell them, hey, thanks for doing that. Even if I've asked my kids to do certain things or put chores on the board, once I see that they're done, I give them that feedback that they want, that, hey, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. That helped me out because of X, Y, and Z, right? Praise them for being kind. Kind is so important right now that it can be very difficult for us to not lean towards kind. So praise them for that, for following through. When you see them follow through, we want to reward that behavior, because when we reward that behavior, it becomes a consistent behavior. For expressing emotions and fears and concerns. Whenever they express those things, don't automatically jump into rescue mode or advice mode. Give them the praise for just telling you what those feelings are, for expressing those, for it coming out. And then praise them just for going through this difficult change. I remember the other day, we were struggling with my 17-year-old, and I knew he was feeling really overwhelmed. Again, something else got canceled that had been scheduled for June, and it was just another disappointment for him. And my husband and I went in and just hugged him. We just walked in his room and hugged him. We didn't say anything, and it was very, he actually started laughing and he felt better. And so just the simple things of acknowledging that, then, we are helping them move forward. And I did get a question here. How do you praise? Well, it's not like I had a choice. Could you give him a choice in that environment? Could you say, could you wash the dishes or vacuum the floor, right? Maybe give a choice, and then they do have a choice, and then they're following through. Or, maybe we choose not to engage with that conversation. Sometimes because of the overwhelming feelings our teens have, they're engaging in negative behavior, right? So they're engaging. It's almost like they are pushing your buttons for an argument. And when we don't let them push those buttons, they aren't getting that response that they want. They're not getting that negative reinforcement of us, losing our temper or saying something back. So for me, in that environment, in that situation, I would just move right past it. I would just say, thank you for doing what you did. And if they said they don't have a choice, I said, but I still appreciate it. Thank you so much. And then moving on to the next thing. That may be helpful, that may be not. Sometimes when we're struggling with those emotional dysregulation, again, we're getting into that executive function piece, and we're going to touch on that here in a little bit. Number 10, avoiding fruitless power struggles. So that almost, you kind of led me into number 10 by asking that question. And sometimes because of their lack of control, the lack of their consistency, the lack of their routine, they are trying to push our buttons to have a power struggle. And I remember people telling me this when my kids were little and saying, choose your battles. It is the same when they are a teenager. Every battle, we're not going to win. Every battle doesn't necessarily need to be fought. And sometimes we, again, giving them space, not engaging, will not give them that negative response that they are wanting, and will push them through. And when we're rewarding the positive versus the negative, you're going to have that shift as they go forward. And so sometimes there are power struggles, and oftentimes just giving choices, right? Or having them involved release that power struggle, because all of a sudden they feel like they're being heard. And that's one of the biggest things. If you ask a teenager across the board, whether they're in a quarantine situation or not, what is the biggest thing you want? And the answer is to be heard. They want their voice to be heard. They're becoming their own person, and they're establishing their own personality and their own wants and desires, and following an ethical path, and they want to have their voice. And so by giving them their voice, that is effective as well. And that's part of my bonus, is treat them as your problem-solving partners. When you can, include them in decision making. Allow them to make choices. So if you're struggling with them completing one thing, give them choices. Say, okay, I need you to do this or this, right? We do that a lot in our house. So you have two choices. You can do this or you can do that. But the expectation, because we've established that as a family, that's the expectation. So you can choose A or B. But those are your choices, and you have to choose one or the other, right? But we involve them in that expectation discussion. We involve them in that problem solving and decision making, because things need to be done for our family to operate just like a business would, just like a school would. Certain things need to be done, and it's not fair for one person to have that responsibility. So breaking up that and what responsibility do they want to take on. This, again, helps them with some of that pushback, and it also helps them continue to grow that independence, because that is part of the problem that parents and teens run into. They are trying to pull apart because they are starting to become their own person, and often that can come with anger, and that can come with sarcasm, and it can come with annoyance, because they're not a child anymore. They need us less and less. And so helping them continue to grow that independence is really important as we move forward. So those are the different areas that you can take or leave, right? There are some that may be really effective in your house. There may be some that aren't. There may be some that you're already doing. But those are some things that we've used, some things that coming out of psychology today that really are there to help us motivate our teenagers and young adults really into helping them have that potential, be more effective in what they do. However, some individuals, and this may be part of what some of you are experiencing as well, is some of our children, some of our teens, some young adults, even some adults are experiencing weak executive function. And so just to kind of wrap some definition around executive function, you can think of executive function as like the CEO of the brain, right? It helps us plan, prioritize, organize. It helps us avoid procrastination, helps us with emotional regulation. It helps us with time management. There are a lot of different pieces of our day-to-day that strong executive function are needed for us to be effective. for us to hit that potential day in and day out. Now, if somebody's struggling with ADHD, a learning disability, autism, a traumatic brain injury, oftentimes we find that that diagnosis is comorbid with weak executive function, meaning they go hand in hand. And the good news is executive function skills are skills that we can teach, skills that we can train to really help an individual conquer that time management. Stay attentive, even if the information is boring and repetitive and mundane and they're non-preferred activity. We can help an individual, struggle through those different areas, build them up and become stronger. And that's what play attention does. And we really work across the board. We work with individuals that are diagnosed, individuals that aren't diagnosed. We work with children that are 5 and individuals well into their adulthood. We have many individuals, 60s, 70s, 80s, because we know that with neuroplasticity in our brains are moldable and shapeable. And just like we can learn to tie our shoes, we can learn to build attention. And that's really what we do here at Play Attention. And there are often weaknesses that we see when individuals struggle with weak executive function. So some of the things you might be experiencing day in and day out is their lack of attention, especially when it comes to schoolwork, okay? Because oftentimes the schoolwork, especially schoolwork now virtually as opposed to hands-on, maybe in a chemistry lab or a really entertaining instructor that's giving them lecture, now all of a sudden they're having to do reading, they're having to do worksheets, and they're having to do almost like busy work. And for some individuals with that struggle with that lack of a focus, that's really, really hard for them to learn that way until we train them and we build that skill for them to learn across the board. Now, individuals are always going to have their preference on the way they like to learn, but we want to give them and give individuals the ability to learn and pay attention in all mediums, even the ones that are that are non-preferred. Emotional dysregulation. So some of that you're seeing, the overly frustrated, the overly angry, the not being able to listen to your side, even if it's very calm, can often be part of weak executive function. When we control our emotions, there are a lot of things that have to happen. I have to be able to pay attention to what you're saying to me or the situation. I have to be able to control any impulse that I have, and I have to be able to process all of that information and then come up with a solution. If I'm struggling with attention, if I'm struggling with impulse control, if I'm struggling with processing speed, it's very easy for me to start having that dysregulation in my emotions. And I'm having that inconsistency. One day it's like, oh, you're dealing with one kid, and the next day it's like it's somebody different. And part of that is that part of their weak executive function. And if we're struggling in one area, we see it. But if we're struggling in all of those areas, that's where we're really starting to see the ups and downs. And I do like to share this a lot of times when we have consultations, when I'm working with families, is of course, I'm still working to motivate my 17-year-old because, again, there's things that are very frustrating for him in this environment. However, we went through Play Attention when he was 14 because we really started to struggle with his impulse control and his memory. And I look back now on what he's done on virtual classroom compared to how he would have done prior to us building those skills for him, and it would have been a totally different scenario. He's doing well academically. He's following through with what he needs to do. He's meeting all of those. He's checking all the boxes. He's grasping all of the assignments because we've built these skills for him ahead of time. And when we don't build those skills, that's where we really see that when that lack of routine changes, and we really see that them really, really struggle. Organization skills are huge when we see a lack of them when they're struggling with executive function. Impulsivity, and it's not always bad behavior. Impulsivity, it can be rushing to judgment, can be taking things out of context. It can be interrupting somebody in a social engagement. So that impulsivity comes out in a lot of different ways. Anxiety, racing thoughts, and hyperfocus. So oftentimes if somebody's struggling with executive function and attention together, it's not that they can't pay attention. It's not that they really have a deficit of attention. It's that when things are not their preferred, they really, really struggle. So if it's their preferred, they can hyper-focus in and do it for hours and hours and give you so much information. But as soon as it's non-preferred, they aren't able to stay focused in. And so we want to balance that out for them. So these are are the different things that executive function, that if somebody might be struggling with executive function, these are ways that you might see it. Now, Play Attention uses a 3-part system to really help you build these skills. And the first part is our body wave armband, which is actually going to pick up their attention, indicative to pick up their attention and their brain activity indicative to attention, and it's going to feed it to the computer. And then there's going to be cognitive training games and a behavioral shaping program. And we're going to put all of those pieces together to really help them build the skills that they're lacking, customizing it specifically for them. Now, I'm not going to really get in very detailed into Play Attention because I could talk a whole hour just about Play Attention. And because of that, we are offering a webinar next Thursday, the 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to cover 100% of Play Attention. It's going to talk about how Play Attention works. It's going to talk about neuroplasticity. It's going to talk about how we customize it for each individual. Like always, all of our webinars are free and they're recorded. So if that's something you're interested in learning more about and you'd like to wait and learn about it in a webinar format, if you type in webinar, we will get you registered for that. But if you're interested in learning more before next Thursday, we would be happy to do that with you. And the way that we do that is we do an assessment package and we do a consultation. So what we do is we like to do an assessment package, which includes 2 assessments. And this really helps us kind of pinpoint what the individual's struggling with. What's that baseline? And we look at 2 different things. We look at attention and we look at executive function. And one is focus and one is brief. And so as a thank you for joining us today to learn a little bit more about motivating your teenager, we also would like to offer you an assessment package, and with that comes a free consultation. So basically what that would look like is we will send you, both of the assessments are done online. You would do the assessments, the results would come back to us, and then we would schedule a time to go over those assessments, but then talk more about Play Attention and how we would create a training plan specifically for your teen. Now, remember, this is something that we can do for children and we can do for adults as well. So a little bit of flexibility in that, but we would like to offer you one free assessment package. Normally they're $99, but as a thank you, again, we'd like to offer that. So if you'd like to do the free assessment package and the consultation to really get more specific about what you're experiencing day in and day out with your teen and really how we could effectively help them, type in assessment. We will reach out to you and gather the information that we need to do those assessments, and then we will schedule a time to go over those. The assessments do not take very long. The attention assessment's 20 minutes. And the brief assessment is a 75-question questionnaire. So however long it takes you to go through 75 questions. So they're really not that long. They're not invasive at all. And so they'll give us a really good understanding of where they're at compared to their peers with their attention and what executive function skills that they're lacking and that they need. So again, if you would like to learn more about that assessment, just type in assessment. We will reach out to you and schedule that with you. If you want to just wait for the webinar and just learn more about Play Attention, again, just type in webinar and we will get you scheduled for that. Now, one last thing I wanted to share before we got done. Some of you have already signed up, and so that's great. I'm so excited. I think we're well over 100 families so far, but we are going to be offering a virtual summer camp starting June 15th. It's completely free. You don't have to have Play Attention. There's no obligation. It's going to be 5 weeks, and it's really for children and adults. What we're going to do is we're going to be offering free activities. So there's going to be videos on how to do different crafts, how to do different projects. There's going to be recipes. There's going to be academic challenges, really something for everyone. And we're going to release, every Sunday, we'll release what the activities are and a video and a little calendar so you can choose which ones you want to do. And then at the end of every week, we're going to send a follow-up to see what went well and what things, were really beneficial for you that week. And so if you are interested in that, if you type in virtual summer camp, we will get you signed up for that. Basically, we put you in a group, and we're going to start sending you emails. If you want text reminders and motivational text, we will gather that information as well. And so it's just a really fun way to stay connected and to continue to provide you content. We know a lot of families right now are not going to be able to do their summer camps because of everything going on. And to help with some of those, because school will be done by June 15th, and just to help keep you motivated, to keep things going, new activities. And again, there's going to be activities that are good for children, younger children, middle-aged children, teens, young adults, and adults. And so we have a lot of families that parents and child and their children are signing up together. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. We're really excited for us to push it forward and to share all of this information with you. So again, if you're interested in the summer camp, you do not have to have Play Attention. Completely free, and there's no obligation. We just want to continue to help support you while you are at home. So that is everything that I had to share with you today. Remember, I am going to be incorporating those slides with the follow-up email. In a couple hours, you'll receive the follow-up email. It will have the recorded link in there, as well as the slides for you. We will follow up with you individually via email if you ask for something else. I am going to check my chat box here because we had well over 100 people here today. And so I'm going to scroll through my chat real quick to see if there are any questions that I missed. Let's see here. So continue to type in your questions if you have them, because this may take me a minute to go all the way through everything. Okay, so Lynn had the question. I have the Play Attention system that I bought years ago, but was never able to get my kid to do it. What should I do? Where should I start? My boys are now 14 and 16. So we will get you reestablished with your coach. That's another great thing that Play Attention does offer, is we offer an executive functions coach, and they're there to help support you. They provide you unlimited support, and they're there to help you with tools to help motivate. Now, my son was 14 when we started, and one thing that Play Attention does include is a rewards program. And so creating a reward that's effective for your 14-year-old is going to be helpful for you getting them on there. Remember, we're starting in small chunks. So we're not asking them to sit down for an hour and do these different cognitive skill games. We're actually wanting to do just 1 hour a week, and we're going to break that hour up. And so, if it's hard to get him to stay, to stay still, or either of them, if we did 15 minutes 4 times a week, they're going to start building that and going forward. And every time they play a game and they earn a goal, they're going to earn a point, or they meet a goal, they're going to earn a point. And really, that was helpful with our 14-year-old to really help him engage in the beginning, because the games are going to look different than traditional video games. All of our graphics are very simple, very low stimuli. That's on purpose. If we made them very highly stimulating, it'd be very easy for them to focus and pay attention to. So we want them to be fun and engaging, but we also want them to be learning something and working through them. And so with my 14-year-old who, played other video games, he was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this. And so creating that rewards program for him was really beneficial, because he was working towards a reward that he wanted. And so that was motivating for him. So our first step, Lynn, would be is getting you reconnected with your executive functions coach so we can pull that up in the system, and reestablishing what we want to do, what goals we want to do with the boys, and just getting reestablished and getting restarted. So definitely something, because that's another thing, is once you start with Play Attention, you do have a lifetime membership. And so we're here to support you, and we're here to help continue through your training if that's what you need. Okay, so long question short, we will reach out to you. Linda said, I would like to send the virtual summer camp information to my parents. I'm a school psychologist with families that would benefit from this. Linda, please share it. The more the merrier, right? We're really, really excited to push this forward. So definitely any professionals that happen to be on here, I had that question before the webinar a couple days ago. Could they share it with their families? Definitely, please share it. Our website is www.playattention.com, and there's lots of great information, but they can always go to the resources tab there. But yes, we will get that link for you to share with your family, so they can register if they're interested in it. Okay, Anne said, I cannot get my 15-year-old son to follow a schedule. So that may be partly because of his struggle with inconsistency, right? Sometimes we know when individuals are struggling with attention, they're struggling with executive function, they struggle with consistency. And some days it's like, yeah, I can check all those boxes and I feel great and things are good. And then the next day, it's like I'm a totally different person and I can't even do step one, right, on my task. And we need to build their consistency to get them to be able to follow through with a schedule. He doesn't have the skills right now to follow through with a schedule. And so there are small things that we can put into place instead of giving him, 15 things to do in one day. We can start with one day, but we can also work through and start to build his executive function and his attention around that consistency, because that is going to help. We hear that a lot of times, especially from adults. So it starts to happen in teens into adulthood because as an adult, I have to be able to follow my own schedule, right? I'm responsible for my time. And when we struggle with time management and we struggle with consistency, we usually can follow something for a couple days and then one little thing happens and it throws us completely off. And so until we build that ability to have that time management and we have that consistency in our day-to-day so we can perform regardless of what happens around us, we can perform consistently day in and day out, we're going to struggle in those areas. So definitely something we can talk about a little bit further. Rachel, I'll reach out to you afterwards and we'll go from there, since you have it, and I'll reach out to you afterwards. Yeah, Lynn, yes, the virtual summer camps are completely free. There's no obligation. So yes, they're completely free to do. We're going to provide all of that content at no charge and no obligation. So Rebecca, if you'd like to talk about this more before you share it with your families, we can do that. I had a question about using play attention remotely with clients. And so it's not always necessarily what the topic goes to when we're working with families, but play attention does have an option to do remote training. Hugo, I will send some information over to you via email that has all of the information, and then we can schedule a time to talk about using play attention remotely offline. So Rowan says, I struggle with executive function myself. If I struggle with it, how can I get my children to do it? And that is true. We see so often that both parents and children are struggling. We're seeing a lot of genetic connection between attention difficulties, between weak executive function. And so that is the great thing about play attention is we can work with both children and adults. And so we can create a schedule or a training plan for both of you. And so not only are your children learning these skills, but you're learning these skills as well. And that is very, very common. When we do consultations and we work with families, generally the family will reach out to us because there's a specific child that they're wanting to help. And as we start talking and going into it, they're like, those are definitely areas that I need help with as well. And so it's very common for us to have parents and children go through the program at the same time. And again, we work from 5, and we always say up to 105, but really well into adulthood, because we know that with neuroplasticity in our brains are always moldable and shapeable. So if we give it the right type of training, we do it for the right amount of time, and we can learn that skill. So even as an adult, we can learn these skills as well. So Yvonne says, I can't get my 13-year-old to prepare for Zoom classes and actively engage in those sessions because she misses out on the details of class assignments and later is frustrated because she doesn't have the information she needs. That is a big piece of our short-term memory. So oftentimes, and that's one of the cognitive skills that we help with here, that is part of our executive function. Short-term memory doesn't just help us remember things that just happened, but it also helps us remember, follow directions and instructions in sequence. When we struggle with short-term memory, oftentimes we aren't able to get all of the information we need to be effective in the tasks that we're going to complete. But additionally, if we can't sustain our attention, we're missing details as well. So it's definitely something that play attention can help with and move forward with as she goes. Without play attention, she's going to have to put more accommodations in place for herself, whether she means reading them out loud or recording them or something like that, to really ensure that she's getting all of those pieces ahead of time. Any ideas about, okay, so Laura asked, any ideas about their dad's house? They're not on routine schedules and expectations for kids 16 and 18. So that's a hard one, right? When we have children that are splitting their time between two households, consistency can be really, really difficult. You know, until we build their ability to be consistent, if somebody's not enforcing it, it's going to be really hard for them to stay on task. However, we have had a lot of effectiveness with play attention where we're training a child at one home, and after they start building the skills, they're doing the same thing in the other home, even though that structure and that schedule is not in place, because it's learned behavior, right? They're starting to do it, they're starting to build those skills, and they need that consistency as they go forward. Yeah, so I got another question that if once you get the link for the webinar and the virtual summer camp, if you can share it. Yes, you can share all of the information that we have. How many users are available for family? Okay, so for the, there's a question here, how many users are available for the family version of Play Attention? Play Attention is the home use, comes with 2 user licenses, so 2 individuals at a time can go through the program. However, because it is a lifetime membership, those 2 user licenses can be reused. So if you have an individual go through the program and graduate, you can always delete their information and re-enroll someone else. Or you can purchase additional user licenses if everybody wants to go through at the same time. So a little bit of flexibility in that, but those 2 user licenses are reusable. And yes, you can always add more in later, or you can add more in the beginning, so everybody's doing it at one time. Definitely lots of flexibility in that. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We really appreciate it, and we will be following up with all of you that have asked for information. There's a lot of you, so bear with us. We're going to get all of that information and get it sent over to you. You can always reach out to our office directly. We are, though, working virtually, so it might be a little bit of lag time for us to get your phone call. But if you would like a phone call back, obviously for those that want to do the assessment and the consultation, we're going to reach out to you by phone to gather that information, but you can always call, or you can always put your phone number down in the chat box. Remember, I'm the only one that has access to that. If you'd like to have some of your questions, maybe I didn't give you as much detail as you were looking for in that question. So if you have a follow-up question and you would like us to give you a call and kind of talk through what you're experiencing, you can put your phone number down in the chat box as well, and we will reach out to you. Again, thank you so much. I know it can be a little bit of a difficult time, but if we just make some few adjustments, it really does help us as we move forward. For those of you looking for information, keep an eye out for that information. We will be sending it soon. And again, thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. You have a wonderful rest of your week and a wonderful weekend. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.